Billionaires who live surprisingly simple lives. Everyone imagines billionaires the same way: private islands, endless luxury, a life so distant it barely feels real. But what if that image is completely wrong? What if some of the richest people on the planet are living in a way that feels almost ordinary? No loud displays, no constant extravagance, just quiet choices that don't match their bank accounts at all. Take Warren Buffett, still in the same modest home he bought decades ago. Or Mark Zuckerberg repeating the same simple outfits daily. Even Ingvar Kamprad, known for avoiding luxury altogether. So what's really going on here? Simplicity, or something far more calculated? Everyone expects wealth to be loud, fast cars, private islands, mansions that stretch beyond what the eye can measure. That's the image we've been sold for decades. The louder the lifestyle, the greater the success. But what if that entire idea is flawed? Because when you start looking closely at some of the world's most powerful billionaires, a strange pattern begins to emerge. They don't look rich, at least not in the way you'd expect. Take Warren Buffett, a man worth tens of billions, yet still living in the same house in Omaha he bought back in 1958. No mega mansion upgrades, no constant relocation, just the same property, the same neighborhood, the same routine. On the surface, it feels almost unbelievable. Why wouldn't someone with that level of wealth upgrade everything around them? But maybe the better question is, why would they need to? Because Buffett's philosophy has never been about displaying wealth. It's about compounding it. Every dollar not spent unnecessarily becomes capital. And capital, when deployed correctly, doesn't just sit, it multiplies. So when people see simplicity, they assume limitation. But what if it's actually optimization? Now shift your attention to Mark Zuckerberg, one of the youngest self-made billionaires in history, yet known for wearing nearly identical gray t-shirts day after day. It became a global talking point. Memes, jokes, headlines. But behind that decision is something far more intentional: decision fatigue. At a certain level of responsibility, even small choices consume mental bandwidth. What to wear, what to eat, where to go. Most people don't think twice about these things. But when your daily decisions can influence billions of dollars, conserving cognitive energy becomes critical. So Zuckerberg removes the trivial choices, not because he can't afford variety, but because variety isn't efficient. And suddenly, what looks like simplicity becomes something else entirely. Control. Then there's Ingvar Kamprad, a man who built one of the largest furniture empires in the world. Despite his immense wealth, he was known for driving an old car, flying economy class, and even encouraging employees to use both sides of a piece of paper to save costs. To the average person, this might seem excessive, almost extreme. But from a business perspective, it's alignment. When the founder embodies cost efficiency, it permeates the entire organization. It becomes culture, and culture scales. So again, you have to ask, are these habits personal quirks? Or are they extensions of something much bigger? Because when you zoom out, a pattern starts forming. Simplicity isn't random, it's strategic. Now let's take this deeper. Why would someone with unlimited financial freedom choose limitation? Because limitation creates clarity. When your environment is simple, your focus sharpens. Fewer distractions, fewer impulses, fewer leaks is in your system. And at the highest levels of wealth, the biggest threat isn't lack of money, it's inefficiency. Think about that. A billionaire doesn't lose their edge because they don't have enough resources. They lose it when their resources are scattered, diluted, or misused. And simplicity prevents that. It forces discipline. It creates boundaries. It ensures that attention, the most valuable currency at that level, is directed exactly where it needs to go. But here's where things get even more interesting. Because simplicity doesn't mean these billionaires don't have access to luxury. In fact, they could access more luxury in a single day than most people could in a lifetime. The difference is, they choose not to. And that choice changes everything, because now, luxury becomes optional, not necessary. And when something is optional, it loses its power over you. So instead of being driven by consumption, they're driven by control. But let's challenge this idea for a moment. Is this lifestyle really about discipline, or is it about perception? Because in a world where excessive wealth often attracts criticism, living simply can also act as a shield. It softens public image. It creates relatability. It builds trust. When Warren Buffett eats at modest restaurants or drinks the same soda every day, it reinforces a narrative. The humble billionaire, the grounded genius, the man who never forgot where he came from. And that narrative is powerful because perception influences opportunity. It affects how people invest in you, partner with you, and trust you. So, now the question becomes even more complex. Is simplicity purely internal, or is it also external strategy? And maybe the answer is both, because at this level, nothing exists in isolation. Every habit, every choice, every pattern feeds into a larger system. Now consider time, the one resource no billionaire can buy more of. When you remove unnecessary complexity from your life, you gain something far more valuable than comfort. You gain time. Time not spent managing excessive assets. Time not wasted on trivial decisions. Time not consumed by maintaining a lifestyle that constantly demands attention. And what do these individuals do with that time? They reinvest it into thinking, into strategy, into building systems that operate far beyond their direct involvement. So while the world focuses on what they're not doing, buying mansions, collecting supercars, flaunting wealth, the real story is what they are doing. They're optimizing, quietly, relentlessly. But here's where it becomes almost counterintuitive, because the more wealth they accumulate, the less they feel the need to prove it. At low levels of success, visibility matters. Signals matter. People want to show they've made it. But at the highest levels, validation becomes irrelevant because the numbers speak for themselves. And when validation disappears, so does the need for display. Which brings us to a deeper realization. Maybe simplicity isn't about avoiding luxury. Maybe it's about transcending it. Because once you reach a point where you can have anything, the real power lies in choosing what you don't need. And that choice is what separates wealth from mastery. Now, let's introduce another layer. Not all simplicity looks the same. For some, like Mark Zuckerberg, it's about removing decision friction. For others, like Ingvar Kamprad, it's about embedding cost consciousness into culture. And for someone like Warren Buffett, it's about aligning lifestyle with long-term investment philosophy. Different expressions, same principle. Intentional living. And once you recognize that, something shifts because you start to see simplicity not as a limitation, but as a filter, a way of deciding what deserves attention and what doesn't. But here's the part most people miss. This kind of simplicity is incredibly difficult to maintain, not because it's physically hard, but because it goes against human nature. We're wired for more comfort, more status, more recognition. And when resources become unlimited, resisting that instinct requires something rare: self-awareness, discipline, and a very clear understanding of what actually matters. So, when you see a billionaire choosing a modest home, repeating the same outfit, or avoiding unnecessary luxury, don't mistake it for lack. It might be one of the most deliberate decisions they've ever made. Because in a world obsessed with having more, they've mastered needing less. And that might be the most powerful position of all. But this is only one side of the story, because not every billionaire follows this path. Some embrace excess. Some build empires around visibility. Some turn luxury into identity itself. So why do a select few choose the opposite? What do they see that others don't? And more importantly, is this kind of simplicity something anyone can adopt? Or is it only possible once you've already reached the top? Because in the next part, we're going to uncover even more examples. Billionaires whose lifestyles challenge everything we think we know about wealth, and the hidden advantages that come with living far below your means. And once you see those patterns, you might start questioning not just how the rich live, but how you define wealth itself. Now here's where the story takes an even sharper turn. Because once you've seen the pattern, you start noticing it everywhere. Different industries, different personalities, different backgrounds. But the same quiet behavior, billionaires who could live louder than anyone else on earth, choosing not to. And when you line them up side by side, something almost unsettling begins to emerge. Take Elon Musk, a man associated with rockets, AI, and some of the most ambitious projects in human history. You'd expect a lifestyle equally extravagant, multiple mega mansions, endless luxury, a constant display of wealth. And yet at one point, Musk publicly stated he had sold most of his physical possessions, including multiple homes. Now, whether every detail of that shift remained permanent isn't even the point. The signal is. Because when someone operating at that scale chooses mobility over ownership, it raises a deeper question. What becomes more valuable than luxury when you already have access to all of it? For Musk, it appears to be focus, fewer anchors, fewer distractions, more cognitive space to direct toward building companies that operate on a planetary, sometimes even interplanetary, scale. And suddenly, simplicity starts looking less like restraint and more like a tool for speed. Now look at Jeff Bezos. At first glance, Bezos might not fit this narrative perfectly. Over time, his lifestyle has evolved, especially in recent years. But earlier in his journey, during the critical building phase of Amazon, his habits were notably grounded. Famously, Amazon's early desks were made from doors to save costs. Think about that, a company that would go on to redefine global commerce, starting with decisions so small, so seemingly insignificant, yet deeply symbolic. Because those decisions weren't about saving a few dollars. They were about setting a standard. When resources are limited, efficiency is survival. But when resources become unlimited, efficiency becomes a choice. And Bezos, like others, understood that early. So the question is, do these habits fade as wealth grows? Or do they evolve into something more refined? Because here's what becomes clear when you analyze enough of these cases. Simplicity at the highest level is rarely accidental, it's engineered. Now consider Charlie Munger, the longtime partner of Warren Buffett. Despite immense wealth, Munger lived in the same house for decades. No dramatic upgrades, no lifestyle inflation that matched his net worth. But listen carefully to how he thought. Munger often emphasized rationality, long-term thinking, and avoiding unnecessary complexity. Not just in investing, but in life. And that's where things start connecting, because lifestyle is a reflection of mindset. If your strategy is built on patience, discipline, and clarity, your life will start to mirror those same principles. So simplicity isn't just a habit, it's an output. Now let's push this even further. What if simplicity is actually a form of competitive advantage? Because think about the average high-income individual. So do expenses. Bigger homes, more cars, higher maintenance, more commitments, more complexity. And with complexity comes fragility. More things that can go wrong, more dependencies, more pressure to sustain a lifestyle that keeps expanding. But these billionaires seem to do something different. They cap the lifestyle and expand the system, meaning their personal expenses remain controlled, while their wealth-generating mechanisms continue to grow. That gap is where real power accumulates, because when your system grows faster than your consumption, you create surplus, and surplus creates freedom. But freedom to invest, freedom to experiment, freedom to take risks without threatening stability. So while others scale their lifestyle with their income, these individuals scale their leverage, and that's a completely different trajectory. But here's where it gets even more subtle. Simplicity doesn't always mean cheap, it means intentional. A billionaire might still spend on things that truly matter to them: health, time, experiences, or strategic assets, but eliminate everything that doesn't. Which means their spending isn't reactive, it's filtered. And that filter is what keeps the system clean. Now ask yourself this: how much of modern lifestyle is actually driven by need? And how much of it is driven by signaling? Because for many people, consumption is communication, a way of showing status, success, identity. But when you reach a level where your status is already globally recognized, you no longer need to signal. And when signaling disappears, spending changes dramatically. That's why you see patterns like wearing simple, repeatable clothing, living in homes that don't match net worth, avoiding unnecessary luxury purchases, prioritizing time over possessions. Not because they can't afford more, but because more doesn't serve them. And this is where the psychology becomes impossible to ignore, because most people believe wealth will add complexity to their lives. More choices, more freedom, more options. But what if the real move is the opposite? To use wealth to remove complexity, to strip life down to what actually matters, to eliminate noise so completely that your focus becomes almost dangerous. Because imagine operating at a level where you don't worry about money, you don't chase validation, you don't get distracted by unnecessary decisions. What does that do to your ability to think, to build, to dominate? And suddenly, simplicity stops looking like minimalism and starts looking like power. But let's not romanticize it too easily, because this path comes with trade-offs. Choosing simplicity in a world that celebrates excess can make you look out of place. It can be misunderstood. It can even feel like you're missing out on what wealth is supposed to provide. So the real question becomes, is this lifestyle something people choose because they've already won? Or is it part of the reason they won in the first place? Because if it's the second option, then everything we've been taught about success might need to be reevaluated. And maybe that's the most uncomfortable realization of all, because it shifts the focus away from what you earn to how you operate. Across all these individuals, Warren Buffett, Mark Zuckerberg, Ingvar Kamprad, Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, Charlie Munger, different paths. But one shared principle: they are not controlled by their wealth. They control how it integrates into their lives. And that might be the clearest definition of true power, because anyone can spend money. Very few can remain unaffected by it. So the next time you think about billionaires, don't just picture the yachts, the mansions, the excess. Picture the quiet decisions, the disciplined routines, the intentional limits. Because sometimes, the most powerful move isn't upgrading your life, it's refining it. Now think about this. If you had unlimited money, would your life actually become more complex? Or would you simplify it? Would you chase more? Or would you start choosing less? And more importantly, what does your answer say about how you define success? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I want to see how you think about this. If this perspective challenged the way you see wealth, make sure you like this video, share it with someone who needs a new way of thinking, and subscribe to CelebSpot. Because here, we don't just show you how the wealthy live. We break down why they live that way. And once you understand that, you don't just watch success differently. You start thinking differently.